For people who are inside of Vietnam, everything is a risk for them.
This is Quỳnh-Vi Trần, or V as she's better known. She's a Vietnamese editor and journalist based in Taiwan, where she runs an online paper reporting on the latest news inside Vietnam.
There are people that I know who wrote for international media using, a pen name and not their real name. And they are afraid of being targeted by the police. It is a very unfriendly situation in Vietnam right now. I can write about the country because I'm not living there. But for people who live there and write on this kind of issues, it is a very risky situation.
Like so many others, V knew that her paper could one day be targeted by the Vietnamese authorities. Then, in the midst of the global pandemic, V's colleague, the prominent publisher and writer Pham Doan Trang, was arrested on trumped-up charges of anti-state propaganda.
So our co-founder Pham Doan Trang was arrested on October 6, 2020, around midnight. I did not know about her arrest until I went online and some people said she got arrested. And I texted her on an app and I said, Trang, reply to me. And that was the last thing I communicated with her. And she was held incommunicado for 1 year before they put her on trial on the charge of propagandize against the state. So I have not have any contact with her because she's now been in prison since October 2020.
I'm Nicola Kelly, and this is Silenced. Today, Vietnam. What's it like to run a media outlet focused on a country which stifles free speech and jails more journalists than almost any other in the world? Censorship in Vietnam has long been an issue. Within the government, there's a propaganda department which rules on what journalists can and can't write about, a sense that you, as a reporter, are always being monitored.
You want to write about things that sometimes the government does not want to be published, right? You want to write about corruption, you want to write about strikes. Maybe it's not something that the government wanted to have done. So if you wanted to write on those more challenging topics, that would be extremely difficult. And I know that there are people who dare to do it, and now they are in prison.
We quite frequently see that Vietnam is slipping down the press freedom indexes. I think it's now one of the worst places in the world to be a journalist after China and North Korea. When did you begin to notice that the situation was deteriorating?
That's a very interesting question that I often get asked by foreigners. But as someone who was born and grew up in Vietnam, Vietnam is a communist country. Okay, they practice Marxist-Leninist in that country. We only have one political party, which is the Communist Party. So that party controlled everything in our lives. If you talk about anything in society, the ruling party controlled everything. If you ask anyone in Vietnam to form a political party, they will never do that because that put you in jail right away.
Vietnam has been a one-party state since 1975, following the fall of Saigon and America's withdrawal of troops from the country, though communism has been around for a lot longer.
In 1956, Ho Chi Minh was confident that the Viet Minh would win the reunification election scheduled for that July. Fearing the communists would indeed win, Diem, with the approval of the United States, refused to hold those elections. Ho and the Viet Minh saw no solution but a military one. Thus, the Second and American Indochina War began.
The attack by communist aircraft at Saigon's Tan Son Nhut Airport has prompted a 24-hour curfew. With communist forces only a few miles from the center of Saigon, the order to evacuate American nationals is given.
A unitary government, in Vietnam, the Communist Party maintains complete control over the state, the military, and the media. For anybody younger than 50 who was born and raised in that society, they've never known anything different.
So I grew up in Vietnam, and I have to tell you, I was a bit brainwashed because when you were growing up in that kind of society, you have to join things in school, okay? So in Vietnam, as a young age, you would join the communist youth, and you have to tie your red scarf every day in school. And I was very proud to be a part of that because I did not know anything about the world out there. So whatever the Communist Party taught me, I believed in it. I believed in their history. I believed in everything until the time I left and I came to America.
So it was a big shock when she moved to America as a girl and saw all of these things from a completely different perspective.
So by 12, I left Vietnam. But 12 was not like, a baby anymore. In America, I had to learn the historical part of our country. Because when I first came to America, I was so surprised there was another flag that the Vietnamese American community have in their celebrating. I saw my mom stood up and sing a different national anthem. And I was just devastated that what was that? So I tried to learn as much about my country's history. And that's when I learned so much about the North and South Vietnam and learned a lot about what happened to the South after 1975.
The city of Saigon was renamed today. The victorious communists who forced the city's surrender said the capital of South Vietnam henceforth will be known as Ho Chi Minh City.
But while free speech had long been repressed in the country, V says the arrival of the internet in Vietnam in the 1990s brought with it a moment of hope that something might be about to change.
There was a better time, I would say, because the internet arrived in Vietnam in 1997. The early 2000s, people will also be able to blog and express their opinions online and connect it with each other. And it would start a kind of a civic space online for Vietnamese citizens, right? Economy is going well. Maybe our political situation would improve as well. However, after the Communist Party's Congress in 2016, the more conservative faction of the party became the ruling group. So I think from 2016 until today, things just getting worse and worse than before. They have sentenced people up to like 16 years, 15 years, and even 20 years in prison just for expressing their thoughts and opinions. Not about calling for a revolution or any uprising. It's just to express unhappiness with the current situation of our country.
Though she moved to the US when she was 12, V always maintained a strong interest in what was going on in her native Vietnam. She knew that the media landscape there wasn't all that layered. There were private companies and state-run organisations, but very few independent media outlets. Then she met Pham Doan Trang, a prominent writer and public intellectual in the human rights movement in Vietnam.
Bloggers and journalists in Vietnam have been imprisoned in the past 5 years under very restrictive legislation aimed to restrict freedom of expression.
It was a meeting that was to change the course of her life.
So I met Pham Doan Trang 10 years ago. She came to the US in 2014 to do a fellowship at the University of Southern California. And I met her, and I learned so much about Vietnam through her. Now, I knew about her before I met her because she was very prominent in the online space in Vietnam. And I tried to keep up with what's going on in my home country using the internet. So I knew about her and I became a very good friend of her. And she is one of the person who inspired me so much. And she changed my view of what I can do for Vietnam. And she decided to go back to Vietnam after her fellowship, knowing that there would be risk that the government may imprison her. But she decided to go back because she shared with us that she wants to be a part of a generation that would sacrifice everything to change our country, to make Vietnam a better place.
Together, along with two other founders, they decided that they would set up an online paper called the Vietnam Magazine, a pioneering endeavour not without risk.
So at that time, the four of us decided that we want to open up an online newspaper, and we will write about human rights, about different legal systems around the world for Vietnamese people, so that they can read about different things, different governmental structures, different kinds of governance, to know that there are a different world out there. But most of our work, we focus on freedom of expression, free press, internet freedom, and the freedom of religion is another part of our work. And we think journalism is a tool to deliver that kind of message to more Vietnamese people.
I imagine that starting an online magazine probably carried quite a level of risk. Have you personally faced risks over the last 10 years since you set up the paper? And is it something that you worry about day to day?
If I say I don't worry about it, I'm not sure if people will believe it. But now I live in Taipei, Taiwan. Taiwan is a very liberal, democratic society, so I feel very safe here. But I am not afraid of writing about these things and also about the human rights situation in Vietnam. So we have two online newspapers, one's in Vietnamese and one in English. The English version, I am the editor-in-chief of that magazine, which is called the Vietnamese magazine. And we write a lot about the human rights situation and political analysis of Vietnam in that newspaper. I do not feel fearful in writing about those things because I think those are facts and it's the truth. And I think more people around the world should know about Vietnam and the situation of their human rights condition. It is sometimes very hurtful for me to just see people to come to Vietnam and praise our food, our beautiful sceneries, and friendly people. I think Vietnam have underlying issues, and there are certain things that people should know more, not just going there for your tours and then come back and forget about it. But the bottom line is I am not afraid of the work I do.
And unlike other countries in the region, V points out that Vietnam is often overlooked when it comes to its poor human rights record.
So if you talk about Asia, China will be the top list, right? And if you talk about Southeast Asia, people would talk about Burma, Myanmar, maybe even Thailand and the Philippines. And Vietnam, unfortunately, I don't know why, that people keep on thinking that Vietnam is a very happy place. If you compare to Southeast Asian countries, I think Vietnam ranked probably at the bottom on human rights. I don't know, but it is, I don't think it's frustrating for me, but it does take a lot of efforts for us in advocating for human rights for Vietnam, because we just have to put a lot of evidence to show that this is how the country is, not the nice way that you looked at it.
So the Vietnam magazine offered for the first time an honest take on the country's politics and society. Bit by bit, they gained a large following, a news source trusted by millions of people. But it was an uphill struggle, with reporters frequently arrested for what they wrote and the constant threat of being shut down.
We are the independent media because we do not subject ourselves to censorship and we do not self-censor. But I cannot say that there are numerous of us. I don't think we can count a handful of them. What happened was there were a few of them, but they got arrested. And that just closed down those independent media outlets.
To get their work out there, they quickly realised that they needed to be versatile, to constantly be one step ahead of the authorities, and to publish across multiple platforms to ensure that they weren't shut down.
Well, Vietnam blocked both of our websites in December 2017, but there are ways that we can still try to get people to read our newspapers. We have done a lot of things. We tried different platforms. We use different apps to post. Facebook a few years back was still a good way of disseminating information in Vietnam. So yes, they blocked our website, but one thing is the VPN in Vietnam is not banned. So people could use VPN to get into websites that got blocked. So Vietnam also blocked, BBC, Vietnamese version, VOA Vietnamese version, and RFA Vietnamese version. So they blocked a lot of websites, but people could still use VPN to get on and read our work. Yeah.
And are there certain names on the government's list? Like, do you know if you're on that list? Are there certain journalists and human rights defenders who are actively targeted by the Communist Party?
I actually don't really know about my name. I think I am not that prominent or well known. I do my work because that's the thing I believe in. But I have to say, transnational repression is increasing in Vietnam. So Vietnam actually went out and kidnapped political dissidents and journalists in Thailand in the last few years. So as recent as last year, Vietnam actually went to Thailand and kidnapped a blogger, brought him back to Vietnam, and now he would be waiting for his trial in the country. One very famous case happened in Berlin, Germany in 2017, I believe. Vietnam actually kidnapped a former official who fled to Germany and kidnapped him right in daytime in Berlin and brought him back to Vietnam to stand trial.
Central Berlin, July 23rd at 10:40 a.m. A man and a woman are held at gunpoint and forced into a car. Witnesses inform the police. The man who was kidnapped is Trinh Xuan Tan, a business executive from Vietnam and former leading member of the Communist Party. He'd applied for asylum in Germany. The German Foreign Ministry believes Vietnam's communist leadership ordered Tan to be taken away.
And that case caused a lot of diplomatic issues between Germany and Vietnam.
The German government is furious and has threatened drastic consequences. German-Vietnamese relations have hit a low point.
So transnational repression is a real thing in Vietnam. And I think sometimes they do not hesitate to commit those acts just to silence people. But I'm not too sure about my name on the list.
So they were successfully getting the word out, but a much bigger blow happened in 2020 when V's co-founder was arrested and sentenced to 9 years in prison. Rather than deterring her and her colleagues, rather than harming their motivation, it just strengthened their resolve.
No, it did not cause us difficulty in continue our work because just like her, we really determined to make this work. What I mean is seeing how the government treated her gave us more strength, more determination that we need to do this. because she's now sacrificed her liberty for the work that we do. I mean, we don't want this dictatorship, and we want everyone able to write freely, express their thoughts freely, and we're trying to do some groundwork so that someday Vietnam will be a free and democratic country. That's what we all look forward to. So we have to keep up with this work and continue to do this kind of work so that her sacrifice will not be wasteful. So yes, it is not an easy feeling to think about your friend who's in prison, but it gives me some strength to continue to work and do something so that I will not waste the time that she's sacrificed to spend in prison for our good cause.
You've been listening to Silenced. I'm Nicola Kelly. The producer was Kevin Caners. This is a podcast series for Article 19.